Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome again. It's the Executive Think Tank, and I'm your host. I'm that privileged guy who gets to host this every week. Can you believe it? This is what I do for a living. This is my job. Well, we won't talk about it as a job. But I'm your host, Velton Showell. I'm excited to be here again today, and we hope that you are too, because Tuesday at 2 is a perfect time for us to take an exhale break so we can inhale for the rest of the day. And the Executive Think Tank is just that, an opportunity for you to sit back, listen, get some tips, some pointers, and some ideas to help you not only finish off today, but finish out the rest of the week because it's just Tuesday and we've got a few more days to go. You know, today's a special day, and I'll tell you why it's a special day. Because anytime I have the opportunity to have a guest who I've known for a few years and I put them in the friend zone, I have fun at the show. We talk about a lot of things. We talk about a lot of things either before the show and after the show that we can't share with you guys. But there's a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about today that we can share from our history, from our experience, and from what we've learned from the area and in the area of leadership. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my friend Jane Pritzker. Jane and I met, I said I wasn't going to say how many years ago, a few years
Please
ago.
don't.
And when I met Jane, I was working for a hotel company, and we were both working for, can I say it, Jane? Hyatt Hotels and Resorts.
Sure.
And she was the opening director of sales and marketing of a hotel in Greenwich, Connecticut. Beautiful hotel. And I had the opportunity to go up and help them with the sales blitz. And what intrigued me about Jane at the time, and I'm going to read you some of her background experience, was was the epitome of a true leader. She had this thing down to a science. We got our information. We knew where we were going, what we were supposed to do. We got tours of the hotel. It brought us up to speed on everything that they wanted us to emphasize and focus on. Now, she created the vision, but she didn't give us a task list. She gave us the opportunity to understand the vision, and then she gave us the materials and the tools to make that vision become a reality. Let me tell you a little bit about Jane Pritzker. She spent over 20 years as a veteran in the hospitality industry. She's currently the Senior Director of Strategic Accounts at Sinden, which is a purveyor or a supplier of hospitality industry information. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Check this out. She works on growing relationships. Now, I just told you she's a visionary. So relationships is one of the things she's very good at, but she's also good at bringing home the bacon or creating opportunities to increase revenue. So they got the right person that's sitting in that chair. She's also serving on the board. Now, let me get this right. The leadership board of the University of Massachusetts Hospitality and Tourism Management Department. You know, one of the things we talk about in leadership is giving back. Not only are you focusing on the takeaways, but you also have to focus on the givebacks. What are you doing to bring somebody else up to the next level? So, you know, she's got a host of experience from hotels to working at convention centers. Most of them are in the Boston area. She worked at the Boston Convention Center. She worked for, as I said earlier, Hyatt Hotels and Resorts, Meridian Hotels, and just she's a leader from the letter L. So I'm not going to take any more time. I'm going to let you listen to my good friend and have a conversation while we have a conversation, Jane Pritzker. Jane, how are you?
I am well, thanks, Velton. Nice to see you. Great
Oh gosh, it's so
excited
good
to talk with you.
It's been too long. I'll leave it at that.
Yes, it has. Many moons.
You know, Jane, I talked about the story about when we met those years ago and how you positioned everything just for that sales blitz. But, you know, it gave me a taste of you as a leader and with a task that's not an easy task with when you're putting together a sales blitz for a hotel that's just coming into the market and just opening, for any product that's coming into the market and being introduced to customers. What do you think as a leader at the beginning or starting a process is the most important thing for you to think about or have in order?
Well, that experience was one of the highlight experiences of my career. To be able to go in at day one, I was the first employee there. It was a hole in the ground. It was me and the construction guys. And, it was a whole different experience from what I had been through before. I'd not opened a hotel before. Certainly, I'd been a director of sales and marketing before, but not for a pre-opening situation. So it was brand new, and a lot of it was, as it was in those days, kind of learn as you go. And it gave me the opportunity to really work on my leadership skills and my management skills, which was super important to me. I had been a director of sales and marketing at a couple of other hotels prior to going to Greenwich.
Mm.
And, you learn as you go. I learned along the way. I saw things in my own style and skills that I liked and didn't like. I looked at who I had worked for previously and looked at their skills, their competencies, what I learned from them, what I learned not to do from them. So Greenwich really was kind of where it all came together for me. And I started to really focus on, kind of as you mentioned, really putting forth a vision of this brand new property, assembling a team, both the team that worked for me directly on property, and then when you all came in for a sales blitz, and really getting them to believe in the dream. It actually was not a great time economically. I don't know if you remember that part of it, but that part of the world, hotels, there had been a huge growth in hotels. The Stanford Marriott had been like the market leader for 100 years. And then all these other hotels got built, and our hotel was sort of in that group of brand new hotels. So there was a huge amount of brand new competition in the marketplace, and the economy wasn't super strong. So it was challenging, but creating that vision and positioning and enabling and helping our internal staff and teams that I worked with to bring that all to life was something that worked well, served me well, and I believed was the right way to approach it.
Mm. It's interesting when you talk about being the first employee of the building and having just you and the construction workers. One of my favorite books was written by a gentleman named Jim Collins. It's called Good to Great. And one of the things he talks about is getting the right people on the bus.
Right.
Tell me, talk about that for a few minutes, your philosophy and how you were able to, in a very competitive market, because obviously the employees or especially salespeople were at a premium. How did you make sure that you built the right team?
I've always been a believer in trying to find people that really had the competencies, not only of presentation skills and being able to convey a message and communication, but listening and hearing. And I've been a huge believer in the importance of listening more than speaking as a salesperson. I know it's counterintuitive to what a lot of people think and a lot of people do. And I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people, and I've sat in on hundreds of interviews, and I've talked to many directors of sales and marketing and general managers and leaders of other organizations. And, and sometimes I'll talk to people and they'll recommend someone and they'll say, oh, they're a great speaker, a great talker. And I'm like, yeah, well, okay, that's good. But, my litmus test is different than that. So it was really to focus on the listening side of things as much as all the other, traditional sales skills that you look for. And again, I'm a firm believer in the sort of the intersection of sociology and business. And I know that it's not a intersection that gets talked about frequently. But in our industry in particular, I think it's critical because we're humans as much as we're business people. There's a lot to be said about that.
Oh, wow. You're not kidding. There's a couple of things that you talked about. I remember, and I don't think it was unique to the training that we got when we were working for the company. But we used to have this little adage that we used to say, if you want to sell, ask, don't tell.
Mm-hmm.
Ask the right questions. And then secondarily, you just coined it, listen.
Exactly.
And sometimes, especially in a leadership role, listening is more important than pontificating your point.
Absolutely. And it's funny, as I've talked with people that I've worked for me, one of the things that people have consistently given me feedback about is they say, wow, you ask great questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's critical because you can ask, remember it was like, oh, you asked dates, rates, and space. That was the old, how things were done years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But it's obviously so much more than that. And asking the questions that continue to move the conversation forward and having customers feel like you understand what's important to them so that they want to go through that journey with you, that's really what makes the difference. I think, in really outstanding salespeople. And that's what I looked for when I was hiring people.
So if I was to say, Jane, describe your leadership philosophies and skills to me, what would that be? What would they be?
It's kind of a combination of things. It's interesting when I think about my career, I've taken sort of the jungle gym approach as opposed to the ladder approach. I got that from Sheryl Sandberg and Lean. Yeah, full transparency. And I didn't think I'd take that approach. I worked for Hyatt right out of school for many years, long time, quite honestly, thought I could spend my whole career there. And then, as they say, life happens and things changed. And I saw the opportunity to work for a different hotel company. I worked for Meridian, and that opened my eyes tremendously. Hyatt was very domestic focused. Meridian was very internationally focused. I learned how to make things work on a global scale as opposed to just a domestic scale. That was hugely eye-opening for me. And I learned a tremendous amount about how to get things done with people that are in different countries and different continents, and that's in place now, but this was, a few years ago. So all of those experiences and working with different components of the industry have helped form my leadership. I also, I had my own company for a long time. One of the things I did was I did sales and marketing consulting for hotels. And within that, I developed a sales training program with a colleague. And that program was called, and this is way back when, and we should have trademarked the name and didn't. It was called Consultative Selling Skills. And that was before consultative selling was a thing. This was a very long time ago. I like to believe we coined the term, but we never copyrighted it. So I guess, but that sort of opened the door for me to really think about the skills and competencies that were critically important in sales leadership and in leadership overall. So I've sort of developed this list, so to speak, this idea of what I think are the most important things in leadership. And I think that it's the intersection, as I said before, between profitability, business, the metric side of being a leader, and the human side of being a leader. And that comes from humility, vulnerability as a leader. That's a really hard thing. Not a lot of leaders are. Not a lot of leaders allow themselves to be vulnerable and are truly humble. Being able to be confident without being arrogant. And again, some of these things are very fine lines. I was reading an article from the Harvard Business Review that said, if humility is so important in leadership, why are so many leaders so arrogant? And Those are the things, the
Oh,
intersection of the human side and the business side are what make great leaders, in my opinion.
oh.
Fair, being truly transparent. Everyone talks about, oh, we're transparent. But what does that mean? You know, and do you live it day to day? And being able to create not just a culture within an organization, but a climate in an organization.
Mm.
And those are the things that cause people to enjoy being in an organization and allows people to reach their best potential, to be their own best selves and be successful both for themselves and for an organization. And I think that that's more important now than it ever has been before.
You know, I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm just, I'm shaking my head and I'm nodding and because the things that you're really touching on and talking about from the humanistic side, I think are a lot of times the things that we either gloss over or are not as important in some circles because we want to hit the matrix, we want to hit the revenue goals, we want to make sure that we make the projections, and to coin a phrase, by any means necessary.
Exactly.
And it's a short-term strategy that really has negative impacts on a long-term goal.
Absolutely. Yeah. Being able to, it's hard to maintain that long-term approach. We live in a short-term world. You know, it's every quarter. What are the numbers? If you work for a public company, what's
Oh,
the
absolutely.
Wall Street, or even if you don't work for a public company, you know,
Hmm.
live in short-term decisions because people generally don't take a really long-term approach, and that's one of the things that I think is sad about our culture today. But it's also a fact of life. So how do you work within the constraints of where we are as a business society with still maintaining a firm commitment to financial and business success and humanity and the people's success and developing people? Some of the best comments that I've had from people I've worked with for and have worked for me is people have said to me, you made such a difference in my life.
Oh, wow, I love that.
And that's amazing. That's the stuff that matters. You know, I can tell you I was director of sales of the year for Hyatt once 100 years ago. That's, you know, I'm proud of it. My trophy broke a long time ago, but, and I am proud of it. It was a great accomplishment. It was,
Absolutely.
as a matter of fact. But really, when the people that have said to me, you made a difference in my life, you made a difference in my career, you helped me become the person I am today professionally, that's what has an impact for me. And that's where I feel successful.
Wholeheartedly. I think that is so perfectly said because it is. As a leader, we're all about taking care of people. We have a job to do, which obviously is to either produce revenue or produce products or services. But at the end of the day, we're not hands-on doing it ourselves. It's the
Right.
people that we have been entrusted to take care of that are actually doing the work. It's interesting because I'm sitting here and I'm having a lot of aha moments because of the things that you're talking about. I know that you get a lot of positive reinforcement yourself based on the people that used to be under your leadership that have now aspired to higher levels, and you get a chance to come back and see them or meet with them somewhere, and you're no longer leader and team member, but your peers.
Right.
And
That's,
I know that's a great feeling.
yeah.
Speaking of that, who has had a significant impact on your development, your
You know, it's funny. It's easier to think of the people, and maybe this is true for everyone, from whom I learned what not to do.
They're just as important as sometimes the people you learn what to do from.
Exactly. Yes. I firmly believe that. When I look back on the people that, you know, I felt like I struggled working with and for, I learned a lot of lessons that way. But the people that were the people that really had that positive approach and impact on me, you know, there's a few of them. You know, I have to say, I don't know if it's my generation or our generation or what, but it seems like the people in more recent years are the ones that really have had a big impact on my life from the standpoint of what I see as great leaders. Somebody I worked with at Encore, Carrie Bradley, she was great. And she modeled, in my opinion, a great leader. And, you know, without naming names necessarily, really the people that, that helped me be the best version of myself, that gave me the freedom and the flexibility, that believed in me, that trust, you know, it goes back to what are the leadership qualities. It almost doesn't matter who they were as much as who had that great combination, or, you know, who has a great combination of confidence in their own ability and the belief in the goals, and communicating those goals effectively and getting buy-in of those goals from the people within the organization. And then allowing their people, both colleagues and people that work for them and they work for, to be able to take those visions and run with them and be successful. You know, I remember in Greenwich, for example, when we opened that hotel, this is one of my favorite stories. The hotel in its original configuration was supposed to have 5 small boardrooms on one end of the building. I don't know if you remember the building, but it's a very long, like 4-story building. And what a huge client in the area at the time, of course, was IBM. They were in White Plains, and they gave 70% of their business to the Westchester hotels. And we were, you know the area, but you know, it's sort of in between. It's the Connecticut-New York line. It's that whole, you know, commute from New York City thing. And the Westchester hotels really, because they were just out of the city, got a lot, and of course, IBM was in White Plains, got a lot of that business. And it was a huge amount of business. It was the Rydtown Hilton. It was Conference Center. They were the hotels to contend with. And I did a huge amount, my team and I did a huge amount of prospecting, you know, really networking through IBM, not just going there and saying, you know, making calls, but really networking through the organization to find the contacts that we made and have them introduce us to other contacts who introduced us to other contracts, to really get the lay of the land and the structure of the company, et cetera. Anyway, through that process, I met a guy who was heading up training and was starting a new training program. And he did a ton of training at the Rydtown Hilton and also at Arrowwood. He was starting a new program and was looking for a place for it. And so I got him to talk to me. You know, he didn't like to do anything in Connecticut. It all had to be in New York. We were, of course, Connecticut. And long story short, he agreed to a meeting, and we walked through. There was steel up at the time, not much else, but we walked through the space, hard hat tour, and he said to me, "Oh, this isn't going to work." And I was like, "Okay, why is that?" And he said, "Well, it's not the space we need. We need 2 classrooms of such and such size, whatever it was, and you've got 5 small boardrooms, and that's not going to work. The total square footage may be fine, but the configuration isn't." So I went out on a limb, and I went to the regional people and the corporate office, and it was a huge amount of business. I think it was worth $2 million in the first year, which at the time was pretty good. A lot
of money, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, long story short, we reconfigured that building. And we built 2 classrooms instead of 4 small boardrooms. And that process was a combination of, I believe, me believing in the client to come on the journey with me, believing in myself and my ability to demonstrate to the people that, you know, the regionals, Hartmut Stouse and the corporate office and all those people, that even though there was steel up, this was a really good thing to do. And them believing enough in me that this was going to come to fruition. So it was that sort of confluence of competence, confidence, knowledge, skill, and trust. And trust was a huge component within that scenario, that we all trusted that we were going to make this work for the betterment of everybody, for IBM to run these great programs, and for us to have this contract of instant business the day we open the doors for a long, long time.
So now, lessons like that, I mean, that's a great story. And, you know, I'm sitting here and I'm envisioning the hotel because I knew it well. I don't know if you ever knew the reason that my counterpart and I were sent to do the sales blitz there was my sales leader at the time, was confident in you and the hotel, but it was a miniature version of the hotel that we were in. And so he said, well, if anybody, and this was his vision, if anybody should be able to sell it, you should be able to go up there and sell it.
Yeah.
So that's why we came up there. You know, it's interesting because a lot of people have a lot of influence on us. And obviously we don't want to name names, but one of the things I learned in leadership was kind of what we talked about, is to take two good pieces from each person's style that I admired, that I respected, that I looked up to, and incorporate those into my style. And on the other hand, people that I didn't have as much respect or admiration for, understanding one or two things that they may have done that was not in sync with who I was and who I wanted to be, and make sure that I didn't take those away. Are there some specific things that you learned from some people that you've incorporated into your style as you move forward?
I think it's a lot of the things that I've been talking about. Really listening to people, the leaders that I've worked with that were genuinely focused on what others had to say, recognize that they didn't need to be the biggest voice in the room. That for them to be successful, all the people around them needed to be successful.
Absolutely.
And for that to happen, they had to hire the right people, have confidence that they hired the right people, and then let them do their jobs. You know, there's so many micromanagers and so many people that are afraid to, you know, they hire, you go through this extensive hiring process, and you hire people and then you micromanage them. There's still a lot of people that lead that way, but the people that showed me that trust was a great skill, and how to trust but also know what was happening along the way was really important. Fairness, people who were fair, that's another really important element of my litmus test. Over the years, as I've looked at organizations that I wanted to work for, those have been, the litmus tests that I look for are the culture. What's the culture of the organization? The leaders, are they fair and reasonable? They have high expectations, great. I love high expectations. My expectations of myself and those around me are probably higher than anyone else's could ever be. So that, you know, I love that. But are they fair and reasonable? That's a huge litmus test for me. Are they forward thinking? Is it, well, this is the way we've always done it? Or let's talk about and let's think about different ways that we can do it. And right now, that's the only kind of thinking that people can have.
Mm-hmm.
The way we've always done it is completely out the window.
You know, I want you to take a minute and talk about that for a minute, because one of the things you touched on earlier in the conversation was the time you spent at Meridian Hotels and the difference between a domestic focus and an international focus. We are now we are in a global economy, in a global marketplace. So many times the people that are under our leadership are not directly there at the same location with us. And
Mm-hmm.
even more so now in the new normal, there are going to be a lot more satellite people. There are going to be a lot more people that are, as they say, across the pond or in other places. How do you, as a leader, coordinate that type of a team and
Yeah.
have keep everybody feeling connected as well as focused?
Yeah. That's a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge. It has been a huge challenge as um, remote workers have become more prominent and more companies have gone to that model. But now, of course, everybody's in that model. So I think a lot of organizations are going to have to play catch up because, and of course, you know, you go online now and you look at all the online courses, managing a remote team. It's like the number one course out there.
Mhm.
And obviously it's critically important. Again, I think it's important to do that. You have to believe you have the right people. I remember many years ago when I was at Meridian, actually, someone had worked for me and then she left to have a baby and wanted to work part-time and wanted to work remote. And this was before that was
Oh, yeah.
done. And
Mhm.
I battled with my general manager and I said, she's good. I trust her. It doesn't matter that she's not in the office. This is how we're going to include her. I had a plan. I laid it all out. This is the reporting structure. These are her responsibilities. Give me 6 months. And if it doesn't work, fine. And he did. And it was successful. And it was successful. I broke a lot of barriers in that hotel.
Woo.
It was successful because number one, she was the right person, and she was so appreciative of being given the opportunity to work like that I knew she would never let me down. And so she worked her butt off to accomplish the goals. So that's part of it, is there has to be a mutual desire for success. You know, there's so many leaders out there who are like out of sight, out of mind. If I can't see them, they're not working.
Right.
FaceTime, you know, the whole
Oh, gosh.
face.
We come from the FaceTime.
And I don't mean FaceTime as in talk to me on your phone, Facebook FaceTime. I mean doing FaceTime in an office.
Yes.
You know?
Oh, gosh. We've
Yeah,
all
it's
battled.
going to be a whole new way of managing for people. And, you know, the technology tools we have will certainly help. And being able to manage Zoom meetings. It's not just having Zoom meetings or GoToMeeting or WebEx or whatever the tool is that you use, but it's being able to manage those effectively, giving everybody the chance to have a voice within that environment. You know, you get all these squares like Hollywood Squares all over a screen.
Mm-hmm.
Are there one or two people who usurp the conversation? Is there dual conversation? Is it conversational, or is there someone, the leader or whomever, going, okay, well, here's the results for last week or last month or whatever the reporting period is. And they're speaking at the people on the screen, not speaking with the people on the screen.
Ah. Mm-hmm.
That's a huge element of it. You know, everybody has to feel like they're part of it and that they're valued. And when and where that can happen is where it can be successful. I've seen it work very successfully in the company I'm with now. I'm remote, was remote from the day I started, and many people are remote. But I feel that there's a really good connection with people, and there's conversation, and hopefully we'll all be able to get together face to face at some point in the future as well, because that is an important component. It'll never go away. But I think that, you know, as people learn to manage in the new normal, learning to connect and manage with people, and be conversational yet business focused is an important element of that.
You know, it's interesting because we're talking about leadership, and I think one of the things that may not get enough attention, and I want to spend a couple of minutes talking, but I know we're almost out of time, and I know, but you know, even if you're the CEO of a company, your leadership, you have to manage in multiple directions, because even the CEO reports to the board of directors.
Right.
So you have to be able to manage upward. And there are other CEOs, maybe in other divisions of the company, that you also have to manage your relationship horizontally.
Right.
And then you've got the people on your team, your direct reports, and the people beneath them. And you've got to not only manage your direct reports, but be viewed by the people under them a certain way so that the team feels good about things. One of the things that I often talk about, and is I'm a big Chicago Bulls fan, and you probably are too. I know. But anyway, one of my favorite coaches is Phil Jackson, and Phil said that good teams become great when the players learn to trust each other. And you talked about trust earlier in your conversation, enough to replace me with we.
Mm-hmm.
So as the CEO, and you're trying to juggle all of these balls, even as the director of sales, you're juggling all of these balls and managing in multiple directions. How do you keep each direction in sync or in focus? Are there any things that you've learned that helped you do that?
Yeah, you know, we learn and grow over time, and there are a number of things that I think have helped me improve in those areas. Some of the key elements I think are empathy. Empathy as a leader is huge. It goes along with humility and trust and confidence without arrogance, like we talked about before. And so when you have a combination of those things, it sets up an environment to be able to be respected, both up, down, and sideways, to have respect, both up, down, and sideways. Those are things that are really important. Another thing that I think is very helpful is breathing. It's good in general, but it's also extremely important. You know, there's stressful times, obviously.
Oh, yes.
And, you know, you can't control, the only thing you can control is how you're going to react. You can't control anybody else's reaction to what happens, to what you say, to what other people say. So when you're faced with a situation where somebody or a group of people have responded, maybe, you know, the board said something, or, you know, whatever leadership level that's above or even below or sideways to where you are. If they've said something and someone around you responds in a way that's negative or critical or difficult or challenging, it's very easy to feed into that. The easiest thing in the world is to be defensive and to feed into it and think, you know, just really respond in a way that's not productive. So one of the things I've really learned to do is breathe. Take a deep breath. Count to 5. Take those moments and reset. You know, I do a lot of yoga now. I'm a firm believer in meditation. I really am I can't say this enough, the confluence of mindfulness, business acumen, strategy, smarts, confidence, business structure, profitability, revenue generation, breathing, humanity. Those are the things that I think combine to create great leadership. And I think that the world is shifting in those directions a little bit, at least I like to believe it is. As, you know, some of the mindfulness practices become more and more introduced into the business world. The wellness focus within the hospitality industry. It's not just physical wellness. You know, when it all first started, it was like, oh, we have jogging maps, and oh, you know, I can lend you tennis shoes and you can go run, and, you know, all these ways of, and we're going to do jumping jacks during our coffee break, and, you know, all that kind of stuff, and healthy snacks. Yet now I think the value of being present and being mindful in a business environment is so important, and I think it's being recognized more and more as one of the critical keys to success of leaders and their organizations. And I think it's something that's going to come into greater prominence. We all have to be present. We can't plan right now. You know, if there's one thing you think about, it's like you have to be present. You have to be in the moment. You can have strategies and you can look at different scenarios of what might happen as we start to come out of this.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't look backward. You can't say, well, you know, last time there was a bad economy, this is what we did. And it, you know, those of us who've been through multiple cycles,
Mm-hmm.
the added benefit of what happened in those times and managing through the good, bad, and the ugly and what worked. Yet this one is still completely different. So we have to look at it not from the standpoint of, well, here's what I did last time there was a recession. We have to look at it from, here's the current circumstance. Let me pull the things that were really beneficial in that time and that helped us be successful and come back quickly. I was in a hotel in the middle of the financial district in Boston during the banking crisis years ago. And it was horrible. I mean, it was limited to certain industries, but it was devastating for our hotel because we were smack dab in the middle of the financial district and banks were going out of business, and it was, and we needed a really unique strategy to come through that. And I believe that we developed one that helped us stay the course and be successful in those moments and really regenerate quickly coming out of it. And I think pulling on all those experiences, as well as I said before, being forward thinking and to the point of, okay, this is unique. What else besides lessons learned from the past, and being able to be forward thinking and mindful are going to help us come up with those creative solutions to get not only the hospitality industry back on its feet, but the world in general. And it's certainly a challenge.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you know, as we all say, business is cyclical. Every time we turn around, something happens that we think is going to be devastating, that we could possibly never recover from. But there's a certain resiliency that we recover from things and we move on. We learn, but we never lose. We
Right.
win or we learn something. And I think we're in a learning mode. If we've never been in one before, we're in one right now.
Absolutely. And being open to that learning as leaders is key as well.
Well, Jane, you know, you have no idea how much I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule today to spend some time with me. And you know, it's been fun catching up after, can I say it, all these years?
I know, you can say it.
But it's been a pleasure having you on the show and getting a chance to reminisce and catch up with you. And if you give me a minute, let me say goodbye to the audience, and
Absolutely.
we'll talk offline.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you very much. I appreciated it.
Oh, you're so very, very welcome. Well, folks, you know, it's interesting. We come here every week and we talk about leadership. And part of leadership is developing a network and a support team. And yeah, I'm going to say it, a group of friends that you mutually admire and respect. And that's what we did today, and we've been trying to do since the inception of the show. Most of the guests that you see are people that I've had relationships with from a business perspective over the course of my career. They are people that I've learned from, that I've experienced things with, and that have grown to new levels in their understanding of their business and what it means to be a leader and an example. So I hope today's show you took away from it as much pleasure as I did. I guarantee you did. And just remember this: People will remember what you do and how you make them feel. They may forget what you say, they even may forget what you do, but they'll never forget how you make them feel. Leadership is about taking care of the people that you're destined or you're responsible for leading. And if you take care of your people, they'll take care of your customers. And at the end of the day, your business will grow. I'm your host, Velton Showell. I just have fun on Tuesdays at 2 at the Executive Think Tank. And I hope you'll join me next week and the week after. Have a great day. Bye-bye.